if you're watching this video, you must have a strong interest in motivation and second language acquisition, or even if you don't, you're extremely lucky because the thing I will talk about in this video is something that very few YouTuber does, which is Directed Motivational Currents, or just DMCs for short. This is a phenomenon of intensive and long-lasting motivation which can be found in many areas, but typically among successful language learners. This is originally proposed and put into a scientific framework by Professor Zoltán Dörnyei. This is a book about it. He is one of by far the most important figures in motivation research and second language acquisition. So because this framework resonates with my own successful language learning experience, in this video I really want to share what a DMC is based on this research, and if you're a language learner, it can potentially help you to keep yourself motivated for quite a long time, to overcome boring and repetitive part of language learning, or even to make yourself happy by learning that language. The first section is about some basic core ideas of a DMC. Now, the traditional and typical way of looking at motivation is that there's motivation and it leads to an action. So the motivation and the following action are two separate things, and this is true for most cases. On the other hand, in this DMC framework, motivation and actions are considered to be something inseparable. You're motivated to take an action, and that action generates motivation, which leads to another action, and this will continue until you reach a certain goal. So once you get in DMC, you're absorbed in these actions, and you can effortlessly keep that without discipline for a long time. Well, this perfectly resonates with my own experience because when I was learning English, my honest feeling was I was having fun, so much that it got absorbed me for a long time. And one day I realized that I was able to speak that language. It was a long journey of 4 or 5 years, and of course there were ups and downs along the way, but now that I look back at it, that's what I honestly feel. Speaking of absorption, some of you may be familiar with this famous flow theory proposed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Sometimes it's also called zone, but whatever that is called, it's basically a state when you're intensively involved in something and that feels so absorbing and you even lose track of time. If you're playing a video game for hours without being aware of time passing, that's one example. So in terms of absorption, a DMC and flow shares that in common, but the biggest difference is time scale. Like a DMC can sometimes last for years, but flow experience is more about a shorter time scale. Now, the last part of this section is about how a directed motivational current is named after. And the reason is Professor Dörnyei used ocean currents as a metaphor for this phenomenon, which makes pretty much sense. Ocean currents like Gulf Stream or California current or whatever that is, they have a starting point and directed to a specific ending point. So if you're a fish, you get in an ocean current, then the current keeps you on the right pathway, transporting you to its ending point. The DMC phenomenon is similar. There's a starting point, and once you get in this motivational current, you're always on the track to your goal. You're more motivated, more energized than you normally are, which pushes you to the goal, just like an ocean current transports the fish to its ending point. Another aspect of a DMC is that it keeps you at a high level of well-being. So for the rest of the video, we will take a look at successful language learners in a DMC as to how they set their goals, how they get in a DMC, how they keep their path and energy along the way, and where this high-level well-being comes from. In this section, we will see how they set their goals. Keyword here is vision and self-concordance. Let's look at vision first. When it comes to setting a goal, it's easy to see here is a current self and your goal, which is a future ideal self. According to possible selves theory, this discrepancy between the current and future self will be a drive for you to take an action. Well, this is pretty intuitive even without science. The thing Professor Dörnyei adds on top of this is that those who are in a DMC, they have future ideal selves with tangible images and senses, which he calls vision. Here's an example from the book. There was a Hungarian woman learning Polish because one of her friends speaks Polish, and she wanted to impress her friend's family in Polish. Long story short, what she did was she imagined herself talking with them in various situations, like in the kitchen, on the porch, when she greets, or whatsoever. So she kept imagining herself actually achieving the goal in her mind. What she did more is she adapted this visioning to her day-to-day learning. Like for example, when she learned some words about traveling, she imagined herself traveling and using those words. Well, this is not difficult, and it's exactly what I did in English and what I'm doing in Chinese right now. Whenever I come across some useful words, phrases, grammar patterns, I always imagine myself actually using them. For example, the most recent one is 你可以不要再说那个字了吗? This literally means, could you not say that word again? But if I replace the object, it also generally goes, could you not say something again? Or Could you not talk about something again? I also do the other way around, so I imagine a situation first, then think about what to say. For example, I'm still a beginner in Chinese, so there would be a case when I don't understand what a native speaker says. So in that situation, I would say 不好意思，可以再说一遍吗? Or I could say 可以讲慢一点吗? So this vision is the first keyword of goal setting. Then the next one is self-concordance. What is self-concordance? Another word for this is identity relevant. So for those who are in a DMC, their goals are strongly linked to their identity, like anything that belongs to them in a deeper sense, like a strong interest and passions, or value and beliefs, something like that. This helps them in two ways. One, to overcome tediousness, and two, to sustain and regenerate energy. One example is building a vocabulary. Memorizing words itself is not fun at all for most of language learners, but what is fun for those who are in a DMC is that the fact this act is taking them closer to their goal, their identity relevant goal. So by memorizing words, they're getting closer to who they want to become of, and this fact generates pleasure and satisfaction, which helps them to overcome tedious work of memorizing. In my case, at the age of 16 or something, somewhere in my mind, I had already made up my mind that I wanted to go out to Japan, and that was an important part of myself and my life. So the reason why building a vocabulary or any other tedious work was not tedious for me was because that made me feel that I'm getting closer to my identity relevant goal. And when you're engaged in something pleasant and satisfying, you won't lose energy. You rather get energized by that, right? So just to quickly review this section, we saw vision and self-concordant goals as a goal setting of successful language learners in a DMC. The next section is about how they get in this motivational current. There are two elements for a DMC to begin: conditions and triggers. Let's look at conditions first. So according to this research, there are at least 3 conditions. The first one is a clear set of goals, which we just saw in the previous section. The second one is sense of ownership of the process and its outcome. This is just about you learn on your own will and being responsible for its outcome. In other words, you believe in what you do, like you can do it or it's gonna work. The third one is challenge skill balance. Now I'm taking challenges for the vertical axis and skills for the horizontal one. Suppose you're right here trying to do something that requires higher challenges when you're low skilled. This will just increase your anxiety. Whereas when you're more skilled, but staying at the same level of challenges, that brings boredom to you. This is originally part of flow theory, but since DMCs and flow have similarities, for a DMC to take place, one condition is to keep yourself in this flow channel, like not too easy or not too difficult. I do this when I choose learning materials in Chinese. Like I always choose something that is a little bit beyond my current level, but still possible to understand with a little bit of extra efforts, like using a dictionary, translation, or guessing from context. And that way I keep a good challenge skill balance. So these are 3 necessary conditions. Before DMC to really start working, there's always a trigger. It could be literally anything like a positive, negative experience or a big, small experience. One example in this research is an open position for a scholarship program that requires a high-level English proficiency. Or another example is a failed job interview in English for an international NGO, which this person had long wanted. In my case, 20 years ago, I just witnessed one of my Japanese friends spoke English in an American accent. That was it. So triggers can be really anything. So what we have seen so far is an ending point and a starting point. The next section will be about how they keep their path to their goal. The first thing to note is that even for those who are in a DMC, they do have interruptions and distractions, even though they're generally super focused. The point is, they can always get back to their learning from the distractions and how they do that. One possible way, even without a DMC, is to keep reminding themselves of the goal itself, or to keep doing goal-reminding things such as watching films in the target language, or listening to music, or learning about the culture, things like that. And that way they can keep making links between what they're doing right now and what they want to become of in the future. In addition to that, as they get in a DMC, their goal exceeds a threshold of personal importance, so it gets really important. So this frequent reminding act will be part of their life so deeply that it becomes automatic. Like they don't need to deliberately pay attention to whether they're on the path or not. But this matches the way I do because, for example, during weekends, sometimes I don't have time to learn Chinese because I have a small kid to take care of, but I always get back to my learning every time new week starts without paying much attention to it. So when they're in a DMC, their goal is always accessible and it works as like a behavior regulator. So even when there are distractions or interruptions, this behavior regulator automatically takes them back to the original path. So this is how they can keep their path to the goal. Now, another important element in this motivational current is how they keep and generate motivational energy for a long time. According to the research, they do this in 3 ways: making a routine, making sub-goals, and doing positive feedback. The first one is about keeping the energy, and second and third one is about generating energy. The first way is making a routine. Well, this idea is pretty easy to understand and we see this a lot of places. Once you form a routine or a habit, you do it because it's automatized. You don't need willpower or motivation to start the action, so they save energy by making their learning a routine. The second way is making sub-goals. According to goal-setting theory, sub-goals have motivating function. They help us recognize progress and provide a feedback and incentives. It's just like this. Here's a sub-goal, and when this goal is achieved, that's progress, and they provide a feedback and incentives, and then there will be another sub-goal, and it keeps going. So the whole process of this positive cycle is working as a motivating function. I think video game can be a good example for this. Imagine you want to get a strong special skill that requires, say, 20 levels up from your current level. 20 levels feels kind of far away, but you can take 20 small steps or sub-goals. Like, oh, let's get 1 level up today and another tomorrow, and this keeps you going forward. The third way is doing positive feedback. When it comes to feedback, you can either look back or look forward. When you look back, your focus is on the difference between the past level and the current level, which has already been achieved. Whereas when you look forward, your focus is on the discrepancy between the current level and your ideal level, which is yet to be achieved. The majority of people in a DMC, they look back and pay attention to what's already been achieved. I think it's easy to imagine if we think about it. When you can see or feel the progress you made, that makes you happy. Or your friends or teacher praises you for your progress, that also feels good. On the other hand, when you pay too much attention to the discrepancy between the current and ideal level, the feedback would always be, oh, I sucked yesterday, and I sucked today too, and I will suck tomorrow compared to the ideal level. How can that be motivating? The way I make sub-goals and feedback is like this. Like I always say in my videos, I like learning from TV series, so my sub-goal is deciphering 1 whole episode. And when that episode is done, I just go ahead and look for another. And I always write down subtitles, so I can always physically see how much progress I've made so far, and this progress makes me want to go more. The last important element of a DMC is that it makes the learners happy. It may sound kind of weird for those who find language learning boring and repetitive because this research says otherwise. So where does this positive feeling come from? At least 3 existing psychological theories explains part of it, like possible selves theory or goal setting theory and flow theory. As mentioned in the previous section, when you have a self-concordant goal and when you take goal-directed actions, this progress generates positive feeling, which is considered as well-being. Professor Dörnyei additionally clarifies what type of well-being it is, and it's called Eudaimonic Well-being. To understand the word eudaimonic, we need another word, hedonic. Both words are the terms in positive psychology and originate with Aristotle. Hedonia is like a type of pleasure which is just temporal and intense, whereas eudaimonia is referred to a deep sense of personal contentment, like something you feel when your potential is put to full use or your personal fulfillment gets realized. Now, according to eudaimonic identity theory, when you develop your skills and talents or make an advancement in your purpose of living, these eudaimonic feelings come together. This just sounds like setting a self-concordant or identity-relevant goal and taking goal-directed actions. The great thing about this theory is that it says even what is usually considered to be boring or repetitive can generate this eudaimonic well-being when it plays an important part of the skills you want to develop. So in language learning, things like grammar exercises or memorizing new words can be boring for anyone, but for those who are in a DMC, they feel eudaimonic well-being from that. Because understanding grammar rules or building vocabulary is obviously an important part in acquiring a new language. So this is where the positive feeling comes from. They make progress toward their identity-relevant goal, and this generates eudaimonic well-being even when the process is boring. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I haven't been able to explain why the way I learn works, but this framework explains everything with science. This is just amazing, so I just wanted to summarize and share with whoever needs it, so I hope there were some takeaways for you too. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.